I have to believe in retrospect that's what caused this guy to stop. He saw me from behind, alone on the street, wearing short, tight Bermuda shorts, covering my ample bubble butt, and decided, whoa, I want a bit of this. Hi, this is Mike Balaban, and welcome to another episode of BAMMER Tales. Today I'd like to describe for you what might be considered the fantasy fuck of my life. At any rate, it's certainly one of them. In 1983, when I was just about 30, going on 31, I lived in New York City, worked in a Wall Street job on the trading floor, and had a best friend who decided to take a vacation with me to Rio during the week leading up to Carnival, the Brazilian fantasy holiday. We were able to access a charter package tour from Pan American Airways, one of the leading airlines at the time, and we got it for only $399 for the entire week, including 7 nights in the hotel, our airfare there and back, airport transfers, and 7 breakfasts. An amazing deal, even if it was in 1983 dollars. We jumped on the opportunity. A couple that we knew in New York, a mixed race, a couple of gay guys, were renting a condo in Rio, so we decided to travel at the same time and hang out together, and we had a fabulous week. I should describe for you what Rio was like at the time. Brazil was having a difficult decade, and Rio was kind of the epicenter of its urban poverty, its crime, and yet at the same time, the Brazilian people are filled with a joie de vivre, a joy of living, that manifests itself everywhere. Even when they are poor, they still have a gusto for life. And so when we got there, we went every day to the beach in Ipanema, the gay beach, post 09, and it was filled with gorgeous men. I should say that the body politic of Rio was gorgeous. The typical gay Brazilian guy at the time was muscular but slender, almost not an ounce of fat on anybody. Subsequently, things have changed as American gym workout habits and the use of steroids have increased. They have become more reliant upon external aids, and their bodies have built up and they're much bigger and more muscular than they used to be. But at the time, they were gorgeous but slender. And my travel mate, Chris, was a horn dog, and he got laid numerous times and was constantly leaving me in the lurch, telling me he'd be back in 45 minutes after having a quickie and then taking 2 hours or not returning at all. And it was very frustrating. He also visited the local bathhouse. It was Termas Ipanema, where he found this beefy Brazilian masseur, Teo, and he contracted for a massage completo with him each time he visited. A massage completo meant that Chris got an internal and an external massage for the same price. I did not join Chris at the gym because it's just not my style. I also didn't get laid elsewhere. I just enjoyed the beach, the drinks, the food, the exotic people, and the friends that I knew. On the night in question, Chris and I went to Copacabana, the other main beach neighborhood, where there were a confluence of a few small gay bars in a gallery right on the beach called Galleria Alaska. And we were having dinner and late cocktails at a cafe along the water when he met somebody walking by and decided to go for another quickie and told me to hang out and wait for him. And no surprise, he didn't show up after quite a while. And I was so frustrated and irritated. I paid the bill, got up and left. And by that time, it's 2 a.m. on a Friday night, let's say. I grabbed a taxi, directed them back to the hotel where we were staying. That was under a mountain and back to the Ipanema neighborhood. And suddenly it felt like the driver was taking me the long way around, trying to increase the fare. Or perhaps even worse, want to waylay me and rob me, who knows. So I quickly told the driver to stop and just let me out right where I was, which was a pretty crazy thing to do, given Rio's reputation at the time for crime. People in Rio who drove cars would not tend to stop at the stoplights during the evening as they drove around the different neighborhoods. They would slow down and then speed up to go through so that they would not risk having their cars carjacked. But I got out of the taxi. I started heading in the direction I thought made sense. Fortunately, my bearings were correct, and I found myself reaching the ocean, which is what I'd wanted, and turning south on the causeway along the water, and I saw my hotel off in the distance. It was pretty quiet by that time, 2:30 or 3 in the morning. Almost no one was out, no traffic on the road, and yet all of a sudden from behind came a loud vroom noise, and it was a motorcycle, a powerful motorcycle, screeching to a halt alongside me. And I was a little scared and put off at first. But when I looked, it was a really handsome Brazilian hunk, dressed all in black, maybe leather, I can't remember exactly. And it turns out I didn't speak much English, and I didn't speak much Portuguese, but after a little bit of communication, it became apparent he was offering me a ride. I pointed to my hotel in the distance, trying to let him know it was only a quarter to a half mile. I really didn't need a ride. And it took a while. When he finally realized that, he's kind of like, well, do you or don't you? And something in me just said, why not? So I hopped on the back of his motorbike. Now, I should admit that in those days, I was known for my muscular built calves, thighs, and buttocks. And I've always been proud of them. And I have to believe in retrospect, that's what caused this guy to stop. He saw me from behind, alone on the street, wearing short, tight Bermuda shorts, covering my ample bubble butt, and decided, whoa, I want a bit of this. So he stopped and put me on the bike, and I put my arms around him to hold on, because otherwise I might have been thrown off when he was riding. And he looked back over his shoulder at me with a kind of a skeptical, piercing look, like, what are you doing? And I didn't have the ability to explain anything to him. I just hung on tight, and all of a sudden he sped off into the night with a shriek. And, it was only half a mile away. And I expected he'd drop me off and that would be it. But lo and behold, he raced right past the hotel and continued on driving for 10 or 15 minutes. I didn't know where he was going, and I was a bit worried. But eventually pulled back up in front of my hotel. And when we got off, I thanked him, and something prompted me to try to communicate, do you want to come up to my room? Which was a risk in itself, because hotels back then did not encourage tourists, foreign tourists, to bring locals up to their room because of a risk that a crime might occur in the room. You might get robbed or mugged. As it was, he accepted after looking at me like, oh yeah? And we managed to get him up to the room. And once we got inside, all pretense ended. He jumped me, not violently, amorously. He jumped on top of me. I rolled over with him. We started kissing, aggressively, tearing off each other's clothes, ultimately getting down to brass tacks and having sex, all the way, in my memory, twice. He screwed me. And it was hot and amazing. Those kind of things can be either powerful or harmful, but this was great. And after a couple of rounds of sex, lying in bed trying to communicate, 5 in the morning maybe, I began to get some idea who he is, and I'm not going to share that because he was the son of one of the leaders of Brazil, a general at the time, and I won't mention his business either, except to say it brought him to New York occasionally. So when we were getting ready to separate, in walks my errant roommate, and he, Chris is a big old flirt from way back, and he sees me with the hottest guy we've seen all week, and immediately starts flirting and almost trying to pick up my date, who was not very responsive to his efforts. And after a few minutes, he said goodbye and left, and we'd exchanged info with each other to stay in touch, and that was it. The rest of the week was amazing. We went to a couple of pre-carnival activities, including a transvestite ball. We got stuck for 2 extra days because of a snowstorm in New York, which wouldn't allow our plane to leave, and did not have a place to stay, but somehow we managed and went back to New York. A few months later, the guy contacted me. He was coming to New York. He arrived. We had a date at a restaurant, came back to my apartment. We screwed again. This time it wasn't so hot. That's when I realized that his violent, aggressive physicality, which was sexy under the initial circumstances, were really focused all on him getting pleasure for himself and not thinking at all about his partner. So I was done with him. Another few months later, I went out to Fire Island, which was the gayest place imaginable at that time. In fact, only gays were really out there. He had told me that he was bisexual, and I accepted that. But on this occasion on Fire Island, I glanced over at the bar during high tea in the pavilion, which is where people go at night in Fire Island, and lo and behold, I see this Brazilian guy, against the bar with a retinue of 5 or 10 of his admirers surrounding him, holding court. Now, Chris, my friend from Rio, was with me and said, "Oh, that's so-and-so," and ran over to pay homage to him and to suck up to him, basically. I really was done with him, and so I kind of nodded and waved to him from afar, and that was as much contact as we had. That's the last I've heard of him, but still in my memory banks, for one hot evening, one time in Rio in 1983, in a hot, sultry evening during Carnival, I had the hottest fuck of my life. That's it. Thank you for listening to BAMMER Tales. Let me know what you think, or tell me what your stories are about. See you soon. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube page and sign up for notifications of future upcoming episodes. You can also be part of the BAMMER community by going to my Instagram page at BAMMER47, to following me on our podcast episode series, BAMMER and Me, or going to our website, BAMMER.co, with stories submitted by LGBTQ people around the world. Thanks again. See you soon. Bye.